Before the faintest light touched the horizon on October 16, 1793, the thick wooden door of a prison cell creaked open inside the Conciergerie, a cold, gray fortress on the banks of the Seine, where the air was heavy with the stench of rot and despair. Inside that cell sat a woman who had once been the most powerful figure in France. Her name was Marie Antoinette, but in the eyes of the new republic, she was no longer a queen, no longer even a human being. She was simply prisoner number 280. Her hair, once a golden crown of royal elegance, had turned completely white, not from age but from terror. Witnesses said it happened overnight, the night she was told that her husband, King Louis XVI, would be executed. The transformation was so shocking that even the guards avoided her gaze. The once vibrant queen who had danced under chandeliers in Versailles was now a ghost, hollow-eyed, pale, and trembling in the shadows of her cell. Life inside the Conciergerie was a living death. The cell measured barely 8 feet across. The walls were slick with dampness. The floor was hard stone covered in straw crawling with insects. A thin blanket and a broken chair were all she was given. The sound of dripping water echoed through the halls day and night, mixed with the muffled cries of prisoners awaiting their turn on the guillotine. Marie Antoinette was never left alone. 2 guards sat inside her cell at all times, watching her even as she undressed, ate, or prayed. She was denied the smallest shred of privacy, an intentional cruelty designed to strip her of dignity. The guards mocked her, spat near her, and laughed when she tried to weep quietly in the dark. Each day followed a monotonous rhythm of humiliation. Her meals were barely edible, thin soup, crusts of bread, and sometimes scraps from the guards' plates. The queen who once feasted at tables of gold now chewed moldy bread beside a bucket that served as her toilet. Yet the worst torment was not hunger or filth, it was loneliness. She had already lost everything. Her husband, King Louis XVI, was executed 9 months earlier. Her best friends, the Princesse de Lamballe and many ladies of her court, were dragged through the streets and slaughtered by the mob. But the final blow came when the revolutionaries took her youngest child, Louis Charles, away from her. He was only 8 years old. Marie had clung to him desperately, begging the guards not to separate them. But they tore him from her arms and locked him in another cell. They told her it was for re-education. In truth, it was psychological torture. Inside that cell, revolutionary officials and prison guards manipulated the boy. They beat him, starved him, and filled his mind with lies until he said what they wanted to hear. They forced him to accuse his mother of incest, of abusing him in unspeakable ways. It was an accusation so vile, so unnatural, that even hardened revolutionaries hesitated. But when it was read aloud in court, it ignited a storm of hatred. The people did not see the truth. They saw only a monster in a queen's dress. Marie Antoinette, hearing the words from her own son, was struck silent for a long moment. Then, in a trembling but clear voice, she said, "Nature refuses to answer such a charge brought against a mother. I appeal to all mothers here." Even the women in the courtroom began to cry. But her trial was a performance, a mockery of justice. Over 2 days, she stood before the Revolutionary Tribunal while they hurled accusations of treason, corruption, and theft. They claimed she had conspired with foreign powers to destroy France, that she had drained the country's wealth, that she was the symbol of everything rotten in the old world. The verdict had been decided before she entered the courtroom. Guilty on all counts, sentenced to death. That night in her cell, she wrote a final letter to her sister-in-law, Madame Elizabeth. Her hands shook violently as she pressed the quill to the paper. "I am calm," she wrote. "I see the end of my sufferings approach without fear or regret. I forgive all my enemies, and I die in the Catholic, Apostolic, and Roman religion, that of my fathers." She asked that her children be cared for, that they forgive those who had wronged their parents. It was a letter of grace, of sorrow, of quiet dignity, but the guards never delivered it. They destroyed it before her eyes and laughed. She said nothing. She simply lowered her head and prayed. At 5 in the morning, the sound of footsteps returned. The guards entered and told her to prepare. She was to die at noon. They handed her a plain white dress, the color of mourning in Austria, her homeland. Her fingers trembled as she tied the ribbons at her neck. Then they bound her hands tightly behind her back with a coarse rope, cutting into her wrists. Unlike her husband, who had been transported to his death in a closed carriage, Marie Antoinette was made to ride in an open wooden cart, the kind used to carry criminals. As the cart rolled through the streets of Paris, thousands gathered to see her. They screamed insults, threw garbage, and sang revolutionary songs. They called her Madame Deficit, Austrian whore, monster. but she kept her head high. Her face was white as marble, her eyes distant. One observer wrote, "Her courage astonished even her enemies." She looked neither to the right nor to the left. She seemed no longer of this world. The ride lasted more than an hour of humiliation, as the mob surrounded her. When the cart reached the Place de la Révolution, the massive guillotine towered above the crowd. The blade gleamed red in the autumn sun. Soldiers struggled to control the sea of people pressing forward to see the end of a queen. Marie was helped down from the cart by the executioner, who stepped on her dress, causing her to stumble. She looked at him and whispered, "Pardon me, sir, I did not do it on purpose." Those would be her final words. At 12:15 p.m., she was placed beneath the blade. The drums rolled. The crowd fell silent for a brief moment, then the blade fell, swift and final. Her head dropped into the basket. The executioner lifted it high, and the crowd erupted in cheers. The woman who once sat on the throne of France, whose every gesture had once shaped fashion and politics across Europe, was now just another severed head on a blood. But death did not end her story. Her body was thrown into an unmarked grave in the Madeleine Cemetery, buried with quicklime to dissolve the remains. For years, no one knew where she lay. It wasn't until decades later, when the monarchy was restored, that her bones were exhumed and reburied in the royal crypt at Saint-Denis beside her husband. Yet even then, her ghost seemed to linger, not in palaces, but in the memory of a world that had destroyed itself in the name of freedom. Marie Antoinette's fall was not simply the death of a queen. It was the deliberate erasure of a human being. Every step of her final days was designed to break her, to crush her spirit before her body. The revolution wanted more than her life. It wanted to annihilate her image, to turn her into a symbol of decadence and punishment. But in their attempt to strip her of humanity, they revealed something unexpected. In her final hours, the woman the world called heartless and vain displayed